Sean Payton time. We get him for 20, 25 minutes on Mondays. We love having him stop by, and there's so many things to talk about. 9 of the 10 playoff wins in the Saints' history have come in the Sean Payton era, and he's just enjoying life by the water, somewhere undisclosed location in Los Angeles. So I will say this. I want to start with Pete Carroll because I was critical of him in the offseason. They'd had 4 or 5 drafts that I thought were a little reckless. I thought the defense, I thought they got a little arrogant. Some of it could have been Russell, Pete, but I was really, really brutal. Then there are times I thought, they're going to draft a quarterback, get it right. I don't even know what the precedent is to a quarterback hitting in his 8th or 9th year, Geno Smith. But as somebody in the league, are you surprised at what you're seeing from this incredibly young team with Geno Smith?
Yeah, I am. And certainly I was skeptical. It's fun to watch those guys now, and it's fun to watch Pete because he looks like he's having more fun than he does. But more specifically, when you're watching Geno, we've seen it happen maybe twice, at least that I can recall. Rich Gannon was a 30-something better player.
Good call. That's right.
He was a 30-something better player.
Yes.
Trent Green was a 30-something better player, and he got injured.
Yeah.
So it's very unusual, in especially when you look at all the rosters
in that division
Geno's been with, though.
Yeah.
I mean, and then my wife is from West Virginia, and so at the start of the year when I'm skeptical on this, I hear about it every week as they win. So
right.
it's I don't want to say it's personal for me, but it's a credit to those guys, and they have drafted well. Like we were talking earlier, when you hit in a draft on that many young players, and you look at the contracts they're playing on, wow, it's fantastic.
Tell me the story you told me off air about Parcells in the draft, because it's so true.
Well, all of us and the fans that love watching the draft, and it's a fantastic event. Thursday night, it's prime time.
So much fun.
We spend 95% of our discussion, generally speaking, social media, all the news sources, and on only about 5 or 10% of the draft. It's the first 20 picks.
Right.
All right, maybe the first round, and yet your better drafts have Kamara in the 3rd round. They have Trey Hendrickson in the 4th round.
Yes.
They have Ryan Ramczyk as the 2nd first-round pick. Marcus Williams.
You and Mickey Loomis hit some home runs later rounds.
Our 06 draft, and it becomes really what you build your team around. But past Reggie Bush in the 1st round, which was a great selection for us. Roman Harper in the 2nd, played 14 years. Jari Evans in the 4th will be a Pro Football Hall of Famer. Rob Ninkovich in the 5th.
Oh, my God.
We just didn't have the vision for him. I told him he was going to be a long snapper. He went to the Patriots and won 2 Super Bowls as an outside linebacker. Zach Streif and Marcus Colston in the 7th.
Wow.
So I think that'll pay dividends for Seattle in the next 5 years.
Oh, no. I mean, first of all, they just found their tackles for a decade, perhaps.
Yeah, unusual. And look, it's a group of people. It's Pete, it's Schneider. Those guys have been together for a while. And most importantly, it's identifying the vision as to what you have for the player. Yeah. And being on the same page.
But it's personal for me. My sister doesn't like sports, but Russell Wilson made her fall in love with the Seahawks. So I get text every Sunday if the Seahawks are winning. So for me, and the power went out, so they were listening in their truck on the radio. All right, I want to go to, listen, you always said, I think you said the best wins are when you play poorly and win because you can coach them hard the following week.
Just a lot you can get out of that.
How about a good loss? To me, Chicago this year is about identifying what can Justin do. And I watched the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm like, you got to feel pretty good in film session today in Chicago.
Yeah, and remember 2.5 weeks ago, a Thursday night game where they had a bad loss at home to the Redskins, or excuse me, the Commanders. We were just talking about Washington. Thursday night, the Bears lost, and everyone watching was fairly critical of the offense and not doing the things that Fields can do well. He didn't really have many run opportunities.
Right.
And so there was a lot of that piling on. And the very next week at New England, it was like, and
Wow.
credit Matt Eberflus and the whole staff, they had a little bit of a bye week, if you will, to readjust. And so I think we're seeing the byproducts now of that little bye week that they had, and the confidence coming off of the New England win on the road, especially for a young quarterback. And so, look, when you have a player like that, it's very common for you to, hey, one assistant coach is going to cut up the Ravens film, one's going to cut up the Eagles film, finding like offenses and like skill sets that you might find an idea that applies to him. We do that all the time, not just at quarterback. But so I think that's one team, and the other was Tennessee a little bit. Like if you said you don't want to lose. Tennessee was the 1 seed last year, so it's completely different. But man, they played Kansas City pretty tough last night.
Let me tell you something. They didn't have a second half first down.
Yeah, it was impressive.
I will say this.
They bullied them a little bit.
You know what? The first play of the game, that tight end play, and he ran over 8 Chiefs. And I thought, oh, this is what they're going to do. They're going to say, okay, you're the pretty team. We're the tough team.
Right.
You know, Vrabel's fascinating as a former player. I always feel like when I watch his teams that his physical presence matters. He is a player. Yeah. And I think when he goes and barks at the players to be tougher and be stronger, and we're in this physically together, I think there's such a buy-in.
Yeah.
Whenever I watch Tennessee, I'm like, is there a coach in the league that has done more without having like the star quarterback and the star? What do you think about him as a coach?
Yeah, I think he's very good. And we undervalue how many years in New England. Just think about, I get to be around Belichick for 8 seasons. And just relative to an education that later I'm going to draw back on when I'm a coach. And so all the details that Bill maybe harped on because Vrabel was a part of all of that.
Yes.
And so I have a ton of respect for him. And look, I would say he's a friend and someone who I think is extremely talented. And, you know, I kind of had the same vision when I was talking with Detroit in the interview process for Dan Campbell. I said, this guy, I think, has a chance to be an offensive version of what Vrabel is for the Titans.
Players will go through a wall for him.
Yeah, and there's a stature, and he's a former player, and he's a tough guy.
Tough guy.
You know, those would be the two if we had one of these MMA deals, right? Who else is in there?
Tomlin would be on the outside. He's
no. He's just Mike's. He would have been 10 years ago. But am I missing someone?
No, you're
there?
right. There's a physical component. No teams play harder than Detroit and Tennessee.
Yeah, and so I thought last night, man, there were 2 different styles, and that was impressive.
It was.
And because quietly in that division, we tend to lose track of them. Like you lose track of their record and their wins because
college football's as big down there as pro. And
yeah,
sometimes they disappear.
We don't get the television. They don't have the same ratings, and so between Houston and Tennessee and Indianapolis and Jacksonville, I think it's tougher.
So, I mean, elephant in the room is that you're going to get calls when the season's over, or you will now. We all know. There's no reason. Sean, you're the very rare great coach on the market. Not since Andy Reid has there been a guy you're like, yep, you'll win really fast, and you'll have a chance really fast. So you're that guy. I'm not looking for inside information, but what I'm looking for here is I want to make sure if you do leave Fox, you take the right job. Because I've said this before about coaches. I've had NBA coaching friends where I've said, you guys are not taking good jobs. You're better than the job. So I look at Indianapolis, and for years I thought it was a stable environment. And this morning I'm like, the hell's going on? If I'm a coach, I mean, it feels like Irsay now runs the whole franchise. Am I wrong?
It's hard to tell from afar. I think a week or 2 ago, they fired their offensive coordinator, who I don't even think was calling the plays. I think Frank's been the play caller. I'm going to go back a little further and say they've never recovered from Andrew Luck.
You're right.
Leaving the building.
You're right.
And when you think about that investment, that was the first time we heard in football this, like, suck for luck. Or, in other words, we need this pick. And so just pick one of these guys that were highly drafted or maybe the first pick of the draft or second or third that are successful and just pretend that they just said, hey, you know what, I'm going to retire. That can set a group back. But it's news to me. It's a surprise to me. And then the news that Jeff Saturday is going to be their head coach.
He's never been a coach anywhere.
Is a surprise. And so you never really can tell until you open the doors in some of these buildings because they're all run differently. It's, universities are run in a similar fashion in the Big Ten or in the SEC.
Right.
But in the NFL.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, they're all independent businesses, and they're different, each and every one of them.
Based on the personality of the guy owning it.
Yeah, ownership, the city, the tradition, and we're living in an era where there's a lot of ownership. I don't want to say flexibility, but there's new owners coming into this league. When I first got into coaching in the NFL, I'd say more than 50% of the owners made their fortune with their football teams. It was the Mara family and the Rooneys and, the Hunts. And there's more and more now I would say clearly the majority are private business success stories that have purchased a team. And so what's going on in Indy, it's hard to tell really unless you're in the building. But certainly and here's the thing, that was one of the teams. This is like me trying to play fantasy football, but I saw them having a pretty good season. I thought Matt was going to be an improvement for them.
I picked him to win the division.
They've got a runner. They've got a good defense, and it's like, what happened? Yeah. And there are a lot of things that happened. But so as Seattle has been a surprise on one side of the room, Indy's been the opposite.
Yeah, we just spent 5 minutes on the AFC South. We have to move off that division. It's boring. Okay, now let's go to Josh Allen. I think I talked to Jimmy earlier. When you have a great player, there's not many, like literally superstar. So, and you're a quarterback whisperer. So you have this great player, and you're very reliant on him. But when I watch them, I think, and the Jets matched up well because they're so good at corner, we're going to take out the big play.
Yeah.
Run the ball. And they don't. So I've said with Sean McDermott, I don't doubt he's a good coach, but this is 4 years now. They haven't developed a run game. It's hard for me to consider them a Super Bowl team when I see Philly run and yesterday Cincinnati run. And I can see Kansas City run. I don't know if you can win a Super Bowl being this reliant on the big play. Can you?
Yeah, well, two things. There's certainly a style in which they play offensively. And so I'm going to use the term RPO, and that's a run-pass option.
Right.
And so if I send in an RPO, I have to be willing to send in a runner pass, in other words, whatever comes of it. But, in our league, there are times, and more than you think, where I just want to frickin' run. Now, that requires me to leave the 8th defender free or the 9th defender free. There are times where most of the time we're getting a loaded box. We're getting a safety dropping down.
But you wanted to run it.
But I still have to find a way to run the ball, even in an 8-man front. I see some similarities though with you remember the Mike Holmgren and Brett Favre. Are we done with the rocket balls? And Favre. I see some of that with Josh. The confidence in this arm, sideline to sideline, vertically down the field, just like with Brett. And so
Holmgren had to come to terms with him and say,
and yet there's always going to be. Each day you go to work, you might have to shout sometimes. And I think that same thing probably exists, not in a I watch from afar, and I do think Sean's a great coach, and their defense has been playing. And it was a tough loss, but it also tells me a little bit about the Jets. And I would say this, much like all we've heard about is the NFC East and the strength of the East, the Cowboys, the Eagles, certainly, and the Giants. Yeah. The same with the AFC East. And if I said to you, in describing the AFC East as being really strong, I don't need the Patriots record, by the way, either, because I'm going to go by the Bills, Dolphins, and Jets. Would you have ever guessed that?
Well, I liked the Bills and Miami. I thought the Jets were a bottom 4 team. So but
that's where we're at right now.
It's great. That's why the league is so amazing.
That division is good.
I watch Mike McDaniel and Miami. I want to go back to Miami because I gave Chicago love for losing. So let's talk Miami. When I watch McDaniel sometimes, I think to myself, Bobby Bowden once told me this, the late, great Florida State coach.
Sure.
He said, I would stay up on the East Coast. He goes, I knew all the other coaches went to bed. I'd stay up, watch Oregon, and steal their plays. He goes, because I knew nobody in my conference did. And I watch Mike McDaniel and the movement and what they're doing with Tua, and I'm like, I think if I was a coach, I'd steal some plays. I think he is real. What do you see from McDaniel?
No, I see the same, and I see a great pedigree. Obviously, I don't know Mike, but his history and sometimes we can't control who we had an opportunity to work for.
Yeah,
you take a job, you need a job.
Sure. And
then if you're fortunate, you work for some people like Parcells or John, like for me. And Mike, I think, has had some of those really, really good influences, and you see his spin on an offense now. And here's what we would do yearly at the Saints, for instance. We would pay attention to, like, who we're jealous of, who's doing things that are uniquely different.
Oh, that's cool.
And who are doing, who's doing things that we think are cutting edge. And that would be a study, not only – it's every week we're cutting that team up. So
somebody's doing something that you guys like.
Every week we're looking at it, and we're gonna present it Wednesday night when we're looking at third down, if it's a third down thought. We're gonna present it Thursday night when we're looking at red zone, if it's a red zone thought, and if it's short yardage goal line. So we are going to, even though let's say we're playing the Atlanta Falcons on a Sunday, we are going to be watching other tape that may not be Atlanta, and it's not necessarily opponent driven, it's idea driven. And
you like some of Miami's ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be one of the tapes we'd study. They'd be on the weekly study list. And there'd be a few that you kick out of there too now. You can only look at a few, and so who's doing things creatively, they would certainly be one.
So if you're dealing with young, often millionaires. Some are highly emotional. Michael Thomas, an emotional player. And so you don't coach everybody the same. And so today, and again, it's our weekly Aaron Rodgers comment. Aaron's an emotional guy. He's rich. He's single. He's going to do what he wants. He doesn't like motion. So today you walk in, and it's 5 straight losses. I thought there was a moment before the game. I think it was CBS cameras, took a shot of him. It was NBC Fox cameras, my bad. I'm watching on a screen, and they took a picture of him, and he just looked like he was in a bad mood. Trading deadline, they didn't get anybody. What's the discussion today? He's rich, he's smart, he's been around. What is the discussion today with Aaron Rodgers to get him back? It's a pause.
No, I think look, it's the immediate challenge in front of you. I said this to you earlier. So I think this is my 5th or 6th show.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's coincided with every one of their losses, but I like how you guys will email me.
Yes.
You'll email me potential topics. And I like the idea that we're not really much
flows.
of this is not, it flows. And we're good with whatever it is. And I feel like every week
we have an
Aaron Green Bay, and I kind of feel like this is the last one.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting like next week's mailer here, but I'm just saying
this is what they are.
I think this has been I think we've repeated this.
Yeah.
Not Mondays, but we've seen Sundays repeat itself. And right now they're not a good team.
That's right.
And can they be a better team? Absolutely. I'm sure they feel like they haven't played their best football, but the body language, the games, and look, losing is awful. Because there's so much that goes into it. It's bad for the players. It's bad for the coaches. There's nothing worse. And the fear of failure is a great motivator. It's probably the number one motivator for any competitive athlete or coach, is that the idea of not winning is really powerful. But that fear of failure is
rough.
Yeah. And so Mondays after a loss, I mean, you go through just because you know all the energy that went into it. And here you have to recalibrate by noon today. All right. You deal with the game that you just played, and somewhere by lunchtime or 1 o'clock, you're flipping the script, and right away you're on to their next challenge.
Yeah.
Who's their next challenge?
Dallas.
Oof.
Oof. Exactly. Oof.
Right?
Off rest, off extra
They're
rest.
a little better than Detroit.
Yeah, it's an oof. That's what you say at lunch today.
That's the game. And so I think Green Bay will play them well in Green Bay.
Okay.
I think they will. Well,
let's end on a good note.
Yeah.
Minute left. I like the Saints tonight. What say you?
Well, I do. I would say this, and I've been a big part of this now. In other words, we haven't played the Ravens well. And let me back up by saying that. It's not because it's been Lamar Jackson that whole time. John's done a great job. I think we won our last match if I'm not mistaken, in Baltimore on a Sunday night. The best kicker that's ever kicked in the history of our league missed a PAT, hit the upright. And we turned around, and I think we won 17-16, and we sprinted to the locker room. But I would say defensively, it's going to be important for New Orleans to have some answers for some of this QB run, because that's something that historically we've not been really good at. And so for Dennis and their staff defensively, early in this game, we'll see how they defend Lamar and some of the design runs. They're still a little nicked up, but it's an important game for them. Horizontally or vertically is the only way they get in the playoffs, right? They're not going to get in as a wild card in that division. It's got to be Tampa Bay, whoever's in the NFC South. It's only a one-team playoff division.
And the Saints have played the Bucs great.
Yeah, so the Bucs aren't it's the schedule coming forward here, and you have to win the South to get in the postseason.
Yeah, this feels like a huge, huge game for New Orleans tonight.
I think it will be Monday Night Football, and look, prime
feels
time.
Different there.
Yeah, they've been really good on prime time.
Yeah, they have.
Really good.
You guys were always a good big game team.
Yeah.
That was that Rams game when you didn't get that call. Other than that, did I bring up a bad...
You just said we were going to end on a good note. You're fibbing right now. I mean, holy cow.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.